My name is my name is Hannah, and this is my no-buy year. So today I watched Jaclyn Hill's reveal video of her upcoming release with Morphe. It's the Jaclyn Hill x Morphe VAULT. So she's releasing 4 10-pan eyeshadow palettes that can all be purchased together in a little kit or can be purchased individually, and presumably they are built from the shades that she had wanted to include in her palette but couldn't because there wasn't enough room. Jaclyn is so gregariously in love with color, and it's so fun to watch her talk about the colors that she picked and the palettes that she curated, and I really do think that she has a strong sense of balance when it comes to chroma, hue, and tone in creating a color, meaning that she picks a good level of brightness and a good level of saturation to go with each hue, like each color that she decides on. In my opinion, she's undeniably good at curating and creating eyeshadow palettes. On top of all of that, the price is so incredibly low. I mean, I know it's Morphe, but I was still surprised when she said that the individual palettes would be $15 and that you could get the whole bundle for $49. So I clicked on the video just out of interest and because I wanted to keep up with what's going on in beauty. And towards the end of watching it, it occurred to me in no uncertain terms that if it weren't my no-buy year, I would be buying this at the first launch. I would be in line, either online or at the Morphe store. I would be dying to get my hands on this, and I would have absolutely no qualms about it being a good choice, a good investment. But it is my no-buy year, so I'm absolutely not going to be buying the Jaclyn Hill x Morphe VAULT. And I started to think along the lines of makeup I have that's better than makeup I want. I have a series on my channel. I guess you could call it a series. I've only done 2 videos in the series so far, but I will be doing more, and you can probably count this as a 3rd. Anyway, it's a series where I talk about makeup products that are new or not that new, but things I've been wanting to buy for some reason. And then I find things in my collection that are either as good or better than those products in some way. I know it's getting kind of popular on YouTube for people with huge collections of single shadows to go through newly released palettes and dupe them shade by shade with singles that are already in their collection. But I don't have a huge collection of single shadows, and I think that there are a lot of us who don't. I have 9 eyeshadow palettes, and then I have 2 small magnetic palettes of single shadows. I will put my eyeshadow collection video in the cards in case you haven't seen it yet. One of the things I like about the Jaclyn Hill Morphe VAULT, and one of the things that I think makes it a well-balanced and kind of elegant release, is that each of the 4 palettes has its own mood, its own kind of color story, its own overall color vibe. So I thought to myself, I can't go through and dupe each palette color by color, but I could definitely dupe the VAULT in terms of these 4 color stories. I can look into my collection and I can dupe the vibes of each little palette. So I essentially asked myself, for each of these 4 little palettes, if I were to sit down and try to create an eye look, the eye look that I would create with that palette, would I be able to create it with shadows in my collection? And if so, which ones would I use? Spoiler alert, the answer turned out to be yes, I absolutely can create the looks that I would create with any of these 4 palettes using shadows in my collection. I do have to jump around from palette to palette a little bit, but that's okay with me. I'm nothing if not resourceful and creative when it comes to my own collection. It's my no-buy year. I'm using what I have. Let's start with the first palette, the really, really warm palette. Now, first of all, this is the palette of the 4 that I would be the least likely to want and the least likely to reach for. If for some reason I acquired the entire vault of 4, I could see myself never reaching for this palette. So even if it weren't my no-buy year, buying the whole vault probably wouldn't be the smartest choice for me. I would probably pick 2 or maybe even just 1 of the others. But as I've learned tonight, I actually don't need any of them in any way at all, so scratch that. The point is, two things are going on with this. Number one, I'm totally not attracted to this palette, and number two, it is actually incredibly dupable shade by shade in my collection. I'm not going to dupe it shade by shade, I'm just going to let you know all of the warm tone shadows that I have, many of which are dupes many times over for this little palette. First off, there's Modern Renaissance. This kind of takes care to me of the deep orange that's in Jaclyn's palette. It takes care of the kind of bright, almost fuchsia colors, because Venetian Red and Love Letter are in that same category. I do think that the fuchsia in this little Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette, I do think that that one is probably brighter when swatched than these two shadows. But on the eye, and especially in the way that one would use a fuchsia like that on the eye, so, you know, buffed out in the crease or to create an overall haze, it's the same. To me, it's essentially the same. Red Ochre definitely covers some of the bases in that palette. And then along with this, I have the Morphe 350. It's missing these two shades that I tried unsuccessfully to depot, but it has this more scarlet red color, which is pretty much a dupe for what's in there. And it's got these kind of golden bronzes, which matches one of the shades in there. I feel like it's just pretty clear looking at these two palettes and then looking at that one that there's nothing that I would do with that little Jaclyn Hill palette that I can't do with these two palettes. On top of which, I also have the Jaclyn Hill palette. So again, like dupes many times over. There's this one, Queen, which is really pretty. There's this really bright persimmon color. There are these three sort of duochromy pinky golds, which match the one in the upper left-hand corner. And when I say that there are three that match that one, that's kind of what I mean by duping the vibes. If I have these three pinky gold shimmer shades, do I need a fourth one, even if there are subtle differences between the four? One of the things that I really like about watching Jaclyn Hill talk about these shadows that she creates is that she is so attuned to the very minute differences between these shades. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think her love of color and her awareness of the differences between colors is wonderful. That's how artists are, and I think it's wonderful. But I can recognize that that's wonderful and then not need to buy all the eyeshadow, because for my purposes, just putting them on my eye, I would be fine with one of those four pinky gold shimmery shadows. And these aren't even the only three that I have in my collection. These are Colourpop singles, and all four of them have a pretty close match in that palette as well. I just feel very confident that I could recreate any eye look, any tutorial using this Jaclyn Hill Morphe Vault palette with these warm tone shadows in my collection. The second palette that she showed is really lovely and exciting. They're all really lovely and exciting, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about being able to practice appreciation for someone's work, for a brand's release, and for an influencer's release without feeling the pain about the fact that I can't buy it myself. I'm excited about the color stories. I'm excited about the vibes of these palettes. And I'm excited to look into my collection and seek out those same vibes. I know that they're here. And to be honest, I'm not really using them. I'm not making looks with these vibes. So I'm finding it very inspirational and not at all frustrating that I can't buy them. In fact, it's the opposite. This has been a really exciting experiment. So this palette, it has these yellows, it has yellow, it has green, it has kind of a duochromy green. It's cool, and it's the one that I've seen the most excitement about in the comments and stuff like that. So I pulled pretty much all singles to dupe the vibes of this palette. And here are the singles that I pulled. This is my closest yellow, I believe. It's not quite as bright mustardy as the yellow in the Jaclyn Hill Morphe VAULT palette. But again, the way that we use those canary yellows, blending them out into the crease to brighten up the eye look, that's why I bought this shadow. I think this is Paper Tiger from Colourpop. Pretty much anything that anyone does with Access from the Jaclyn Hill palette, I can do, I feel, with Paper Tiger. And I almost prefer a slightly more muted yellow, although Paper Tiger it's pretty wonderful. I've got this shimmery white that matches the one that was in her palette. This is sort of like a pale peachy orange, but I'm covered for orange. Like I've got Real Guard, Modern Renaissance, I've got the Morphe 350. The orange in this palette, it's not sitting here with these other ones, but it's absolutely no problem to find a color like that. The ones that are really interesting are Coin and Classified, and I know again that I'm not doing like a shade by shade dupe, but it was exciting to me that I found that I have these kinds of duochrome light greeny and shimmery dark greeny colors that really do not exactly the same thing that the colors in her palette do, but a similar thing, and they create like a similar vibe, a similar story, similar relationships with the other colors, etc. I also have this matte army green and a nice bright gold, and then the burgundy, the dark brown, the fiery persimmon. We've already seen that I have those in my collection. So when I first saw her showing this palette, I was like, wow, I don't have anything like that. And then when I looked in my collection, I was surprised to find that actually I have everything like that. It shocked me actually. This is the one that I was the most surprised by. So I'm looking forward to experimenting with creating some yellow vibe looks. This Colourpop shadow is Tea Garden, and this one down here is a Makeup Forever shadow. And I just haven't really thought to put those shadows together in that way before, but I'm thinking about it now. Moving on to the purple one. This was the easiest because I really gravitate towards these kinds of colors. My mind went to about 1,000 places as soon as I started trying to think about duping the vibes of this palette. And in fact, the first place that my mind went was to my Marc Jacobs Style Icon palette, which many of you have seen a bajillion times by now. There are a lot of sparkly grayish lavenders in here, and there are three sparkly grayish lavenders in this Jaclyn palette, and then there's one kind of matte lavender. So for many of the looks that I think I might end up creating with this Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette, the purple one, I could dupe the vibes of it with this palette. So that was my first thought, because that tends to be my go-to palette for those kind of shimmery, silvery, lavender types of looks. But then I started looking at my singles, and look at this. So these two big ones are Makeup Forever shadows. This really, really shiny, sparkly one is from JD Glow Cosmetics, and then the rest are Colourpop. And there's pretty much everything that you see in this palette here in terms of its general vibe and the way that the looks would end up turning out. The only thing that I don't have exactly is that super bright purple, but I have a number of shadows that function in the same way. So I have the purple in the Jaclyn Hill palette and the blue in the Jaclyn Hill palette. They're not exact dupes, obviously, for that shade that she has in hers, but they function in the same way. Like I could use them as the same pop of color in the same place on the eye with the same general vibe. And then I also have the Urban Decay Electric palette. There's also kind of a grapey purple in here that doesn't look that bright when it's in the pan, but it actually, I mean, yeah, that's pretty close. And if I needed it to be bluer than this to look more like the one in this palette, for some reason, if I needed it to be exactly like that, I could blend it with a blue. There's just no way that that I would ever come up with a purple look that I absolutely needed that one shade in order to create. And I think that part of what this is helping me do is to make a distinction between wanting eyeshadows so that I can use them and wanting eyeshadows so that I can have them. Wanting colors, like wanting to have a color. I understand wanting to have a color because I love color. the most of anything on this planet. Like, I am a color fiend. I absolutely love depth of color. I'm really addicted to it. That's part of why I'm so entranced by makeup. So it's very tempting when you see a color and you know you don't have that exact one to buy it, but you can't own color. You can't buy color. Seeing the color here on my computer screen is the same as seeing it, being able to swatch it in terms of having access to it. The only thing you do with color is see it. And I see it. I see it right there. It's incredibly beautiful. I don't own that eyeshadow, but I see it. Buying an eyeshadow in order to use that eyeshadow is different. In order to use that eyeshadow to make a look, that's different. And if I wanted to make a look with the vibes of this palette featuring bright purple, I have everything I need to do that. I absolutely do. So this last one is the one that I looked at it and I thought, I don't know if I can do this. It's the one that I thought would present the biggest challenge to me because I knew at a glance that there's something I don't have in my collection, deep matte blue, like a deep matte teal, deep matte Prussian blue. I just don't have a shadow like that. And so I thought, I don't know, those blues, those kind of matte teal blues are the heart of this palette to me. They really are. And so I just was like, can I dupe the vibes of this? So as you can see, this is the palette that I tried to create on my eyes. I thought, let's actually do it. When I sat down to film this video, I thought, well, the fourth palette is the one that's the hardest for me. So what would happen if I actually tried? So I pulled up a picture of the palette and the swatches, and I imagined what I would do. I imagined myself dipping into it and creating an eye look. And then I tried to find shadows from my collection to make the look that I would be making with this palette. And it came together like that. It was effortless. And I think, and also I wouldn't have really done this. But doesn't it quite look like I made this look with that Jaclyn Hill palette, doesn't it? I'll tell you what I used. First of all, I pulled these three little singles. These are all Colourpop shadows, and there are these three colors in that palette. I think everybody has colors like that 1,000 times over, so again, I'm not exactly trying to dupe shade by shade, but I had them there in front of me and I used them to create this look. I reached back into Team Captain, which is the Colourpop single that I had put with the yellow palette vibes group, and I used that in my crease, so it was the other single that I kind of took. And then I went into my Urban Decay Electric palette, and I used this teal. Now at a glance, this teal looks like a much lighter color than the deep smoky Prussian blues and teals in this Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette. But in practice, blended out over that army green and into that army green, and then blended into a black in my outer V, it smoked it out, it darkened it, and it really made it perform in the same way that a deep blue would perform in the crease. On top of which, when I look at the actual swatches of the Jaclyn Hill palette, those blues and greens swatch out, and I assume that they buff out to be a bit brighter and something that would be more of a match for this teal. So I was worried about getting the effect of deep blue and deep teal, and before I knew it, it was there on my eye. I then went into this really, really bright, gorgeous silver shade that's in the Urban Decay Electric palette, and this is, I can't imagine that the silvers in that Jaclyn Hill palette even come close to this. Maybe they come close, but they can't be better than this. This is really incredible, bright silver pigment. And then I also used a little bit of the Stila Magnificent Metals Diamond Dust on my inner corner to create this look. So now that I've done this, I'm looking at this palette, I'm looking at the swatches and at the layout, and I actually feel like there's nothing I don't have. There's nothing that I could do with this palette that I can't do with what I have. And this was kind of my first experience with blending colors together to get a third color, or blending colors to try to get a certain effect when you don't have the exact one that someone has said you need to get a certain effect. And I was shocked at how well it went. I was shocked at how easy it was, and I had a great time creating this look. I feel it's very Jaclyn Hill Dark Magic vibes. I'm kind of in love now with the idea of duping the vibes of something that you want. And I'm curious now to kind of go back through my collection and see if I can dupe the vibes of other newly released palettes, or any of the palettes I've kind of been drawn to over the past year that I haven't purchased. I think I probably can. I know that there are colors here and there that I don't have, but not every color is necessarily essential to the vibes of a palette, especially when I actually sit myself down and force myself to be honest with myself about what kinds of looks I would actually create with any of these new palettes. Because I have a lot of eyeshadow and I know what I like. I've been buying what I like. I already own what I like. So anything that I like in these 4 little mini palettes, those are the things that I pretty much already own. I do like this release. I am drawn to this release. This is definitely a version of makeup I have that works in lieu of makeup that I want, because I do want this, right? I feel the pull towards it, but I don't want to buy it. I don't want another big hulking thing on my vanity. I don't want 4 little eyeshadow palettes that only do things that I can already do with my collection. I actually don't want it. It's even less desirable to me now that I've seen what I can do with what I already had. I just had to put my mind to it. If all of my eyeshadows were to suddenly disappear, I would happily just purchase this Vault and have that be my only eyeshadow going forward forever. I think it could work in that way, and that's pretty high praise. That's pretty phenomenal. I think she did a good job. But my makeup hasn't disappeared. I don't need to do that, and I'm very grateful that that is the case. That is it. Thank you so much for watching. I strongly encourage you to pick a shadow palette that you have your eye on and try to dupe its vibes. If you do that, please let me know in the comment section down below. I'm shocked at how fun and how gratifying it was for me, and I hope that it would be the same for you. Maybe consider giving this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And don't forget, whatever you're dealing with this week, to take extra good care of yourself, so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.